I called the alien Empress adorable, and it changed the entire galaxy. You called me what? The High Sovereign of the Zephyrian Dominion did not ask questions. She issued verdicts, carved from cold control and edged with ancient power. Yet right now, her voice actually pitched up. The living nebula crown above her head flickered, its constellation of lights momentarily glitching as if the entire palace AI couldn't believe what it had just heard. Jax Monroe grinned. Adorable, he repeated, like he wasn't standing in the most dangerous room in known space. In a terrifying cosmic overlord sort of way, obviously. The Hall of Concord was a weapon disguised as a room. Vaulted ceilings rippled with hard light constellations. Floors were mirror-flat obsidian shot through with star-like circuitry. Holographic banners of 100 species drifted in the air, every angle calibrated to remind visitors they were standing in the heart of the largest empire ever built. At its core, on a raised dais shaped like a sliver of comet, stood Sovereign Lysara. Her skin shimmered like deep violet glass. Bioluminescent lines traced her veins in soft silver. Her eyes were twin rings of molten gold that had stared down admirals, assassins, and planetary uprisings. Worlds had bent at that gaze. Jax did not bend. Mostly because the formal Zephyrian kneel involved 3 arms and a floating spinal joint, and he had neither of those things. Terran, his translator band kept tagging him in the corner of his vision. Species, human. Status, disposable, if he kept talking. The hall had gone silent enough to hear the charge hum inside the guards' pole arms. Delegates froze mid-breath, robes and carapaces suspended. Somewhere near the back, a priest of the Keth collective actually dropped his incense cage. Lysara blinked once, slowly. I require clarification, she said in a tone that had once preceded orbital bombardment. What did you call me, human? The sensible response would have been to claim mistranslation. Blame the neural link. Pretend it was a human idiom meaning Supreme Annihilator of Worlds. Jax had been a corporal in 3 different brushfire wars. Sensible had long ago been smoked, shelled, and buried. He shrugged. Adorable. Also, intimidating as hell. 10 out of 10, would not pick a fight, might buy you a drink. Somewhere to the left, the Zephyrian Lord Rectifier made a choking noise. Several delegates flinched like they expected an execution beam to lance across the room. Lysara stared. The luminous crown above her pulsed from cool white to a startled rose gold. You, she said slowly. Find me. Adorable. Yeah. Jax flashed what had been repeatedly described as his punchable smile. Those eyes could cut hull plating, but when you tilted your head just now, that was cute. Sorry, Majesty. My mouth gets advance clearance over my brain. The silence dragged so long the translation nodes started to loop buffering icons. Then, impossibly, the corner of the Sovereign's lips moved. Not a full smile. More like her face was remembering the concept by rumor. Guards, she said. Half the hall flinched. Do not incinerate him. The same half flinched again, confused. Lysara stepped down from the comet dais, light breaking against the seamless folds of her dark mantle. Each step whispered authority. She stopped a single pace away from Jax, close enough that he could see faint, hairline cracks of exhaustion in the perfect glass of her composure. What is your designation? She asked. Jax Monroe. Terran Peace Cohort, Cultural, well, technically security adjunct, but mostly I stand in the back and try not to break anything. Her golden gaze swept him up and down, 2 long dark hair, regulation beard that refused to regulate, ceremonial Zephyrian uniform that fit like it had been tailored for someone taller, broader, and less made entirely of stress and caffeine. You are very bad at not breaking things, she said. Yeah, he agreed. But I'm very good at meaning them. The nebula crown flickered again. Lysara straightened without breaking eye contact. Delegates of the Dominion and allied polities, she said, voice amplifying through the hall. This human has just committed a grave breach of decorum. Jax swallowed. Ah. Here we go. For this, she continued, he shall be punished. Gasps. A rustle of silk, chitin, and feather. He will remain in my palace as a behavioral consultant. Every translator in the room lagged on that last phrase, struggling to fit it into any known context. The Lord Rectifier's crest spines flared. Your Radiance, that is. Lysara didn't even glance his way. Did I request commentary, Sirek? He dropped into a bow so fast his forehead nearly dented the floor. Jax blinked. Wait. What? You will stay, Lysara said, attention back on him. Until I determine precisely how dangerous your honesty truly is. It took him a second to decide if that was better or worse than vaporization. The guard stepped in. Not with the cold, efficient menace they use for prisoners of war, but with the weird ginger caution of people tasked with escorting an explosive curiosity. As they guided him out of the Hall of Concord, Jax muttered under his breath. Nailed it, Monroe. Day 1 of Don't Screw Up the Peace mission, and you've been adopted by a war goddess. High above, on her dais, Lysara watched him go. The crown's lights dimmed to a thoughtful blue. After centuries of terror and obedience, someone had finally looked at her and said something no one had dared. Not your Radiance. Not Supreme Sovereign. Adorable. And for the first time in a very long time, she was not sure if she wanted to erase the offender. Or understand him. Jax had slept in foxholes, cargo holds, and once, memorably, inside a broken drone chassis during a meteor shower. He had never slept in a room that shifted the stars to match his mood. The accommodation suite they dumped him in was about the size of a small Terran town. Curved walls of translucent crystal looked out over the capital spires, a forest of light and metal stabbing up into the artificial dawn. A lattice of drones moved in the distance like migrating birds, carrying data, cargo, and occasionally some flustered minor official. The floor under his bare feet warmed subtly to his body temperature. The bed looked big enough to land a shuttle on. A seam in the wall dilated. A thin Zephyrian attendant floated in on a grav disc, arms full of folded fabric. Human Jax Monroe, they said, dipping a bow that involved 3 shoulders and no spine. Wardrobe has prepared acceptable garments for audience proximity. Jax eyed the stack. Dark fabric, intricate silver stitching, something that looked suspiciously like a cloak. Is there a confuse fewer doors and trip over less option? He asked. Because the last outfit tried to kill me. The attendants stared, then checked their wrist node like they expected an error message. Humor, they said eventually, like diagnosing a disease. I was warned. By who? The Sovereign herself. The attendant's tone wobbled on that word. She ordered, do not dull this one. I wished to see the edges. Jax whistled low. Can't tell if that's flattering or ominous. Yes, the attendant said gravely. Correct. They showed him how to activate the adaptive seams, how the collar adjusted itself to Zephyrian notions of presentable, rather than strangling, and then retreated with the nervous haste of someone who suspected standing too close to him might be a court-martial offense. He spent 10 minutes pacing the room, 10 more testing the transparent wall to see if it was actually there. It was, and it nearly broke his nose, and another 5 trying to figure out which panel flushed the never mind. He'd barely worked out the sanitation protocols when the door irised open again. 2 palace guards stood there, armor panels gleaming, ceremonial halberds humming with containment fields. Their helmets were featureless masks of chrome. Human, one said. The Sovereign requests your presence. Let me guess, Jax said. She wants a refund. Neither reacted. Zephyrian armor apparently came with sarcasm filters. Lead the way, lads, he sighed. The palace was an assault of beauty. Vaulted corridors flowed like frozen waves, inlaid with glowing sigils that pulsed faintly as he passed. Columns weren't columns. They were branched beams of light solidified into matter. Half the surfaces looked like you'd fall through them and into actual space. Are these load-bearing holograms? He muttered once. Do not touch the architecture, a guard said stiffly. So that's a yes. They emerged into a chamber that could have swallowed the Hall of Concord whole. It was circular, the ceiling a swirling storm of projected galaxies. At the center hovered a low platform woven of silver vines, gently spinning just enough to make him nervous. On it sat Lysara. She was not in the full regalia from earlier. Her mantle was lighter, sleeveless, revealing bioluminescent circuitry tracing the lines of her shoulders. Her crown had dimmed to a simple circlet of light. She still looked like she could order the annihilation of 3 star systems before breakfast. "Human Jax," she said. "Sovereign Lysara," he replied, trying a bowish half-nod that probably insulted 12 protocols at once. Her gaze dipped to his attempt, then back to his face. "You are uncorrected. Is that a compliment? A concern?" She gestured. A gravity ripple eased him onto a seat that rose from the floor, forming itself around his shape. He tried not to yelp. "The Lord Rectifier assures me," Lysara said, "that humans require structured conversation for psychological stability." "Some of us just like to talk," Jax said. "The unstable part is optional." Her eyes flared faintly. "We will test this. For diplomacy." A floating tray drifted between them, bearing 2 thin crystal vessels. The liquid inside was a pale, luminous teal. It was very much glowing. Jax squinted. "Is your drinking water supposed to need a reactor license?" "This is distilled Linares bloom," Lysara said, with the faint pride of someone showing off a vintage. "Filtered through comet ice over 17 cycles." He sniffed it. It smelled like mint and static electricity. "You don't just drink water?" he asked. "Raw hydrogen-oxygen solution is used for coolant and cleaning," she said, faintly offended. "We do not ingest it. That explains so much about your culture." She tilted her head. "Ingesting coolant is common for yours?" "We call it coffee." She considered this. "And it is pleasant?" "No," Jax said. "It's survival." Without quite meaning to, he smiled. She stared at that. At the way it twisted his scar at the corner of his mouth, the way it crinkled the skin around his eyes. Zephyrians smiled rarely and only in private. Supposedly, the sovereign did not smile at all. "Drink," she said abruptly, looking away. He took a cautious sip. His tongue fizzed. His teeth hummed. For 3 seconds, he was absolutely positive he could outrun a photon. Then it settled into something cool and sharp and unexpectedly gentle. "Huh," he said. "That tastes like if good decisions had a flavor." Lysara froze. Then she laughed. It wasn't the cold, polished sound the news feeds occasionally replayed from her ceremonial speeches. It burst out of her in one startled, unguarded rush, bright and musical and absolutely wrong for someone who commanded dreadnoughts. The guards flinched like someone had fired a weapon. Lysara slapped a hand against her mouth, eyes wide, as if the laugh had betrayed state secrets. Jax had to grin. "There it is," he said softly. "Knew you had it in you." Color, actual color, rose along the edge of her high cheekbones, the bioluminescent lines pulsing brighter. "You are impertinent," she managed. "Yeah. It's a whole thing. Imprudent. Also accurate. Unfiltered. That's the nicest thing anyone's said to me all week." Lysara leaned back slightly on the hovering seat, studying him like he was some strange relic dredged up from a forgotten war. "Very well," she said at last. "You will report here daily. You will explain human social protocols, humor, and informal address." Jax blinked. "You want lessons in hanging out? The Dominion must understand its allies," she said. "You are now my primary reference." There were a dozen ways this could end badly. Court intrigue. Political backlash. Accidentally teaching the most powerful being in the sector how to prank ministers. Jax Monroe, veteran of 3 wars, survivor of 7 near-vacuum mishaps and 1 karaoke night on Ceres, looked the sovereign of Zephyr in the eye and said, "Sure. Let's ruin an empire together." The next 2 weeks did not topple the Zephyrian Dominion. They did something far worse. They made it weird. Every day at second light, Jax was escorted through the palace to one of a rotating series of casual interaction venues. Whoever picked them had no idea what casual meant. One was a garden of floating stones, each one singing a low harmonic chord when stepped on. Another was a long, narrow room where gravity alternated direction every few minutes, sending pillows and furniture drifting from floor to ceiling. Each time, Lysara was already there. Never late, never rushing, posture perfect, crown dimmed to a softer halo when it was just the two of them. Today, she announced during their third session, we will discuss small talk. Jax groaned. You're starting on hard mode. Is this not simply conversation with reduced informational density? That's one way to describe it. It's more like verbal stretching. You start with weather, work up to trauma and tax law. She frowned. We have no weather. Climate systems are regulated. And our tax code is automated. Yeah, that tracks. He explained it anyway. How humans filled silences with comments about clouds, traffic, or the relative quality of vending machine snacks. How it wasn't about the words but the reassurance of shared existence. Do you employ small talk? She asked. Only when I'm scared. She regarded him for a long moment, then said solemnly, the solar flare today is adequate. He snorted. Nailed it. Other days she brought him lists. Define date. She read once, in the floating stone garden. Context indicates a social ritual distinct from timekeeping. Jax scratched the back of his neck. Yeah. A date is when you decide to spend time with someone on purpose. Usually with food. Sometimes with poor life choices. Romantic bonding? She pressed. Courtship? Sometimes. Sometimes you just end up arguing about movies for 3 hours and wondering why you left your apartment. She stared, then, to his horror, took notes. He tried to teach her sarcasm. It went about as well as trying to explain color to a sensor array. So, he said, sprawled on a couch that was definitely designed for something with more joints. If I say, oh great, another briefing, I probably mean the opposite. You say the opposite of what you mean, Lysara said slowly. Deliberately. Yeah. And others understand this? Usually. Or they think you're just bitter. Which, to be fair, we often are. She considered. This seems inefficient. It is. But it's emotionally satisfying. Her eyes narrowed with interest. Show me. He hesitated. You can't just use sarcasm on live diplomats, Lys. You have to practice. Lys, she repeated, tasting the shortened name like an unfamiliar spice. Sorry, he said quickly. Too familiar? She looked like he dropped a live data core in her lap. No one abbreviates my designation. Humans abbreviate everything. It's either affection or laziness. Sometimes both. And when you called me adorable? That was just brain damage. The crown's light shifted in a pulse of bright yellow. She was trying not to smile again. He could tell. He could almost hear the effort in the way her fingers tightened on the arm of her seat, the way her shoulders stayed locked even as her eyes warmed. He found himself leaning in, chasing that warmth. Why do you do it? She asked abruptly one afternoon, while they watched the orbital traffic through a transparent strip of wall. Speak without filter. It endangers you. Jax thought about it. About officers who preferred polished lies over blunt truths. About orders that had gotten people killed because nobody wanted to say this plan is stupid. Humanity's already good at dying, he said at last. If we're going to go, might as well go honest. Is that your species' motto? She asked softly. We've got others, he said. Most of them involve coffee. The more they talked, the more the palace shifted. Not visibly at first. The guards remained rigid, the ministers stiff. But servants lingered a little longer at doorways, their eyes wide, when the sovereign's laugh slipped through. Courtiers whispered about her time with the Terran. The crown's colors started changing more often, subtle shades of turquoise and soft gold whenever Jax made a particularly bad joke. One evening, as they ended a session, she hesitated. Jax Monroe, she said. Do you miss your homeworld? He blinked. That's not on your vocabulary list. Answer. He leaned back, staring up at the ceiling's slow swirl of simulated galaxies. Sometimes, he admitted. Mostly the parts that don't try to kill me. The sky. Street vendors. People yelling at each other over stupid things instead of artillery trajectories. And yet you left, she said. Earth didn't exactly roll out the red carpet for me, he said lightly. Space was hiring. Her gaze softened in a way he hadn't seen before. You are rootless. Yeah, he said. Portable. Good for travel, bad for therapy. Perhaps, she murmured, almost to herself. That is why you are unafraid. You have nothing an empire can take. He thought about that later, lying awake in the too-soft palace bed, watching the stars rearrange on his ceiling to match his elevated heart rate. He had more than he thought now. And that was the new danger. The palace rumor net hit critical mass the day the sovereign took the human outside. Not outside the palace. That would have been scandal enough, but outside protocol. This, Lysara said, as they stepped onto a public transit platform suspended over the capital's central chasm, is an observational excursion. Jax tried and failed not to stare. The city of Zephyr Prime unfolded around them like a circuit board built by gods on a sugar rush. Towers spiraled into the fake clouds, surfaces alive with holographic advertising and drifting gardens. Bridges of hard light arced across air traffic lanes. Below, an endless river of pedestrians and drones flowed along multilevel walkways. You sure we shouldn't have brought, I don't know, a tank? Jax asked. Or at least a decent hat? I feel underdressed for toppling a civilization. Lysara's mantle was gone, replaced by a simpler sleeved tunic that left the luminous patterns on her forearms visible. Her crown had collapsed into a slender band that could almost be mistaken for jewelry. Almost. Her security detail lurked a respectful distance away, trying to look inconspicuous and failing miserably. We are here, she said. For, what was your word? People watching. Well, Jax muttered. I need my own dictionary entry now. They walked. Wherever they passed, the crowd parted like a wave around a boulder. Citizens dropped into abbreviated bows. Some pressed their hands to their hearts, others lowered their gaze, not daring to look directly at her. Jax could feel the air tighten every time someone realized he was walking beside her, not behind. He caught snippets of hushed conversation. That's the Terran. He made her laugh, I heard. Corrupting influence. Lysara's posture never faltered. But he noticed the way her hands curled a little tighter at her sides. The way she didn't look directly at anyone, as if afraid of what she might see reflected back. Hey, he said quietly, nudging her with his elbow. Rule one of people watching. You actually have to look at them. My people look, she said. We see everything. You see performance, Jax said. Watch this. He veered toward a nearby stall clinging to the edge of the platform. It was little more than a floating counter with a bank of steaming canisters and an old Zephyrian with more wrinkles than facial area. Two of whatever won't kill us, Jax said, leaning an elbow on the counter. The vendor blinked up at him, then passed him to Lysara. Their skin went several shades paler. SOV Sovereign, they stammered, attempting to bow and nearly falling off the platform. At ease, Lysara said automatically. Yes, Radiance, of course, Radiance, forgive me, Radiance. Jax waved a hand. You got anything that doesn't glow? The vendor stared. Glow. Human digestive systems are less tolerant, Lysara supplied, straightening slightly. We require low reactivity sustenance. The vendor fumbled with the controls and came up with 2 skewers of something that looked like grilled spiral shells on sticks. Jax eyed them. They did not glow. Promising start. He handed over his wrist tag. The vendor hesitated. No, Sovereign's presence is honor enough, we could not charge him, Lysara said sharply. He is not a supplicant, he is a customer. The vendor's mouth opened and closed like a gaping fish, but they did as commanded. Jax took a careful bite. It was smoky, salty, and unexpectedly sweet at the core. His eyebrows shot up. "Huh," he said. "That's really good." Lasara watched him, then, with a deliberateness that made the entire platform hold its breath, took the other skewer and raised it to her lips. The vendor looked like they might faint. She bit, chewed, paused. Her eyes widened. "This is," she said slowly, "unorthodox." "In a bad way?" Jax asked. Her crown flickered bright gold. "In an admirable way." "Careful," he said. "If word gets out the sovereign likes street food, your nobles are going to implode." "Let them," she murmured, taking another bite. They continued walking, side by side. For the first time, Jax saw heads turn not with fear, but with confusion. With curiosity. Once, a small Zephyrian child stumbled into their path, chasing a hovering toy. Their guardian gasped, grabbing the child by the arm and dropping into a trembling bow. "I beg forgiveness, Radiance, It is nothing," Lasara said. Her hand moved halfway, as if to help the child up, then stopped, fingers curling back. She let her arm fall. Jax saw the aborted gesture like a flare in the dark. Later, as they leaned on a railing overlooking the infinite drop of the city's central chasm, he said, "You wanted to help that kid." "We do not touch commoners in public," she said automatically. "Why?" "It blurs distance." "Maybe distance is the problem." She turned her face away, watching the pulsing arteries of traffic and light. "An empire must be elevated. Untouchable. It is how we survived." "How you froze," Jax said. "Not the same thing." The wind shifted, carrying up the smell of sizzling food and ionized air. "Jax Monroe," she said quietly. "Do humans not fear their leaders?" "We do," he said. "We just complain about them a lot. It's expected. You complain about power. It keeps it from getting too full of itself." Her laugh was softer this time. Less startled, more rueful. "You would be catastrophic on the High Council," she said. "Yeah," he said. "That's kind of our brand." The joke was stupid. That was the worst part. Of all the things that could destabilize a centuries-old dominion, plague, invasion, economic collapse, it turned out to be Jax sleep-deprived and venting about bureaucrats. They were in the strategy chamber, a cavernous room ringed with holographic displays. Models of fleets, trade routes, and entire star systems hung in the air like baubles on invisible strings. Lasara was preparing a broadcast. Jax was drinking something that approximated Terran coffee but tasted like melted batteries and regret. "Explain again," she said, reviewing a projection of proposed policy changes. "This Terran phrase. Rolling with it. It means pretending you meant to do that," Jax said. "Whatever that is. You stumble, you keep walking. You drop something, you turn it into a bit. This is strategic? It's survival," he said. "Leaders screw up. Pretending you're perfect just makes everyone hate you faster. Better to admit you tripped, and make it look like part of the dance." She studied him. "You make chaos sound like choreography. Chaos is just choreography with worse music." He didn't think about it again. He certainly didn't think about it when he watched her broadcast later, leaning against a pillar just off camera as she addressed half the known galaxy. "Citizens of the Dominion," Lasara began, every syllable crisp. "We enter a period of adjustment. Trade alignments shift. Old treaties are renegotiated. We will make decisions swiftly, and not all will be perfect." Jax's eyebrows rose. This was already new territory. "If we stumble," she continued, "we will not pretend we are flawless statues. We will roll with it." The hollow cameras zoomed in. Somewhere in the control booth, a director choked. Jax nearly inhaled his coffee. Lasara didn't stop. "We will learn. We will adjust," she said. "We will not worship an image of unchanging power. We will be alive! The words reverberated through the chamber, through the relay arrays, out into 1,000 systems. Silence followed. Not the deep, awed silence of fear. The stunned silence of people realizing their unbreakable statue of a sovereign had just admitted, on record, that she could trip. The feeds exploded. Within hours, "Roll with it" had been translated into 12 major languages and 3 minor ones. A pirate station remixed the phrase into a dance track. Dockworkers painted it on cargo crates. Students made it a slogan, scrawled in luminous graffiti along skybridge rails. Some of the memes were less than flattering. Jax watched a compilation on his wrist node the next morning, cackling helplessly at the sight of Zephyrian elders awkwardly trying to imitate the new "Roll with it" dance, which involved a lot of controlled falling. He nearly crashed into a wall laughing when the Palace News AI displayed "Public approval, plus 23%, underneath a clip of Lysara's speech. He was still grinning when the Lord Rectifier cornered him outside the strategy chamber. "You," Sirek hissed, Crest's spines rigid. "Human. You will cease infecting the Sovereign with your casualness." Jax took a slow sip of his drink. "Morning to you too, Sunshine. You have made her a joke," Sirek snarled. "They make songs of her words. They paint her phrases on street stalls. Seems like they like her more," Jax said mildly. "They should fear her." "Maybe they can do both," Jax said. "Fear what she'll do to her enemies. Trust what she'll do for them." Sirek's eyes flashed. "You think you understand our ways because she indulges you. You do not. You are a glitch, Terran. A malfunction. And glitches are corrected." He stalked away, robes snapping around his ankles. Jax watched him go, thinking of all the failed systems he'd seen patch themselves into new shapes instead of reverting to old ones. Glitches, he thought, made things interesting. Inside the chamber, Lysara was staring at a holofeed of her own approval ratings with an expression Jax had never seen on her before. Not pride. Not calculation. Something like bewildered hope. "They are laughing," she said slowly as he entered. "At my words." "With you," Jax said. "Not at you." "Is there a difference?" she asked. "Yeah," he said. "There really is." It didn't take long for the backlash to find them. Power structures hate being laughed at. The first sign came in the form of a closed council session. Jax wasn't invited. Not officially. The guards at the chamber door were polite but immovable. "Orders of the High Council," one intoned. "Only core ministers and the Sovereign may attend." "Cool," Jax said. "I didn't want to sit through 3 hours of people arguing about tax parity between moon mines and ring habitats anyway." He leaned against a nearby pillar, listening to muffled voices rise and fall behind the sealed doors. At some point, the shouting got loud enough that the sound dampeners hiccuped. "Corruption of demeanor. Centuries of protocol. Laughing stock of the outer sectors. The human must be removed." He pushed off the pillar, hands curling into fists. Removed. It wasn't like he hadn't expected it. From the minute she'd said stay, he'd known there would be a price. He just hadn't realized that price might be her throne. The doors eventually whispered open. Ministers spilled out in clusters, faces tight, voices taut. None looked at him. Lysara emerged last. Her crown was bright and hard again, all hint of soft colors gone. Her mantle was fully activated, layered plates of dark material rippling with protective fields. Her expression was carved stone. "Jax Monroe," she said. That tone. Formal. Distance measured in syllables. He swallowed. "Yeah. Your presence," she said, "as informal advisor is, under review." There it was. The bullet, dressed as bureaucracy. "Under review," he repeated. "Is that the official way to say get out?" She flinched. Barely, but he saw it. A tiny crack in the granite. "The Council believes your influence has compromised my image of infallibility." He barked a laugh. "Newsflash, Lys. You never were infallible. You were just lonely and terrifying. The guards stiffened. The nearest minister looked like he might faint. Lysara's jaw clenched. Do not. What? Jax asked. Tell the truth? That's kind of my thing. Your thing, she said sharply, is making light of what you do not understand. You do not carry the weight I carry. You do not know the cost of missteps at this level. He stared at her. At the careful way she picked her words. At the way she refused to meet his eyes. You're scared, he said quietly. Of you? She almost laughed. Do not be absurd. Not of me, he said. Of needing anyone. Of them seeing that. The air between them thickened. A guard cleared their throat. Sovereign, shall I escort the human too? Lysara raised one hand. The guard shut up. She stared past Jax, out at the city. You will be transferred to the Terran embassy wing, she said, voice flat. For your own safety. And for stability. So that's it, he said. I'm a bad patch you're uninstalling. Silence. Tell me one thing, he said. All those nights, all those talks. Did they matter? Or was I just a temporary entertainment program? Her fingers tightened on the edge of her mantle. The crown flickered, glitching for half a second. You presume much, she whispered. You taught me a word for that, he said. Courage. He stepped closer, ignoring the way the guards shifted, their weapons humming. Here's some more, he said. You didn't just let me change things. You wanted it. You were drowning under that crown and clutching anyone who threw you a rope. Her eyes flashed. For a heartbeat, he thought she'd strike him. Instead, she turned away. Escort him, she said. Now. They took him. Through halls that suddenly seemed colder. Past servants who wouldn't meet his gaze. Past the garden where she tried street food for the first time. He didn't see her again that day. Or the next. The rumors changed. Whispers that the sovereign had come to her senses. That the human experiment was over. That order would be restored. In the Terran wing, embassy staff pretended they weren't relieved to have him back. They slapped his shoulder, told bad jokes, brewed real coffee. Jax played along. Laughed in the right places. At night, he sat by the window and watched the distant shimmer of the palace lights shifting colors he couldn't quite decode anymore. The distance between them felt heavier than any gravity field. He didn't get back to Earth. Not because he changed his mind. Because someone else tried to change his heartbeat to zero. The attempt was almost insultingly predictable. Forge a transfer order, get the troublesome human into a shuttle hangar, arrange for the shuttle to have a malfunction, en route to the nearest gate. Jax's instincts started screaming before he even saw the shuttle. The hangar bay was too quiet. The text too stiff. The guard detail too polite. Monroe, said Lieutenant Havers, the Terran attaché, low enough that the Zephyrian overseer couldn't hear. Something feels off. Yeah, Jax muttered. This whole thing smells like old rations. He was still trying to decide whether to ditch the entire plan and barricade himself in the embassy when the hangar doors irised open again. A squad of palace guards strode in. Not the regular ceremonial detail. These wore the black trim of the sovereign's personal phalanx. Their commander stepped forward, helmet folding back to reveal a scarred, severe face Jax recognized, Captain Vyrek, Lysara's shadow on every battlefield she'd ever personally attended. Human Jax Monroe, Vyrek said. You are to come with us. By order of the Sovereign. The Zephyrian overseer in charge of the shuttle blanched. Captain, we have clearance orders signed by. Vyrek didn't look at him. Those orders are void, he said. You will erase them from every system and forget you saw them. Jax's stomach dropped. How void are we talking? Void enough that your transport would have failed, Vyrek said. Permanently. Havers swore under her breath. Jax exhaled. Well, I hate being right. Vyrek turned his gaze fully on Jax. The Sovereign commands your immediate Containment. Containment, Jax repeated. That's a polite word. It is the safest option, Vyrek said. For you. They brought him back to the palace. Not to his original suite. To a smaller room with a single transparent wall and a very solid door. Technically luxurious by any prison standard. Still a cell. House arrest, huh? Jax said, dropping heavily onto the narrow seating platform. Do I at least get conjugal visits with my dignity? The guards outside did not laugh. He spent the first few hours pacing. Then doing push-ups. Then swearing at the ceiling and inventing elaborate scenarios where bureaucracy spontaneously combusted. At some point, exhaustion pinned him down. When the door finally whispered open, he was half asleep and fully annoyed. If that's the execution committee, he said without looking, give me 5 minutes. I want to look surprised. It is only me, said a familiar voice. He sat up so fast he nearly fell off the platform. Lysara stood in the doorway. No crown. No mantle. Just a simple dark tunic that made her look smaller. More dangerous. Less myth, more person. Her eyes were brighter than he'd ever seen them. Not with rage. With something like fear. So, he said, tugging his shirt straighter. Containment, huh? That what we're calling kidnapping these days? The council moved faster than I anticipated, she said. They proposed a permanent solution. Yeah. Vyrek hinted, Jax said. I'm flattered I warranted an assassination plot. You guys usually save those for admirals. Color flickered along her throat. I rescinded the order. Quietly. Officially, you are under arrest for destabilizing Imperial protocol. Unofficially. Unofficially? He prompted. You are alive, she said. And in my reach. That is preferable to the alternative. He stared at her. At the tight line of her mouth. At the way her hands would not quite unclench. I thought you were done with me, he said bluntly. Decision made. Human error corrected. I tried, she said, and there was a crack in that word that startled him more than any shouted anger. For 2 nights the palace was quiet. No laughter. No arguments. The crown did not change color once. The ministers were pleased and I. She broke off, looking away. And you hated it, he said. I could not breathe, she whispered. It felt like drowning in vacuum. In silence. He leaned back against the wall, letting his head thump gently against it. You're not supposed to say that, he said. You're supposed to be the unshakable sovereign. I am very tired of supposed. She snapped. They stared at each other across the room. Jax was the one who broke first, a reluctant smile tugging at his mouth. So your solution was to throw me in your nicest jail. For now, she said. Here, the council cannot lose you by accident. Here, I can decide what happens next. Do I get a say? He asked. Her gaze met his. You always have, she said softly. That is the worst of it. He swallowed. I asked you once, she continued, if humans feared their leaders. You said yes, but you also questioned them. Challenged them. She shook her head. No one has ever spoken to me as you do. That's because they enjoyed breathing, he said lightly. And yet, she said, stepping closer, I find myself addicted to your inconvenience. Addicted, he repeated. That's a strong word, your radiance. No crown, she said. Not here. He hesitated. Liz. The syllable felt heavier now. Less like a joke. More like a promise. She stepped close enough that he could see tiny fractures in the smooth glass of her irises. Microimplants age strain, he didn't know. He only knew they made her look more real. I do not know how to do this, she said, voice barely above a whisper. To rule and also feel. To remain untouchable and yet wish to be touched. Here's another Terran phrase for your collection, he said, his own voice rough. You can't have it both ways. The corner of her mouth twitched. You counsel rebellion. I counsel honesty, he said. If you're going to rewrite the rules, start with your own. They stood like that, gravity humming between them, until the palace alarms shattered it. A low rising wail, different from the usual chimes and status tones. Lower. Meaner. Lysara's head snapped toward the transparent wall as the cityscape outside erupted in sudden streaks of light. What is that? Jax demanded, already moving toward the glass. Perimeter breach, she said. Internal. As in, she said grimly. Someone has decided they are done waiting for the council to handle their problem. She spun toward the door. It responded to the biometric ping in her stepping foot, sliding open. Stay here, she ordered. This room is shielded. I'm not great at staying put, he said. Jax. Lys. They stared at each other. The alarms howled. Somewhere distant, something exploded. Fine, he said. But if this cell gets stormed, I'm charging them for the curtains. Her eyes flashed, and this time he recognized the expression. Fear. Not of the rebels. Of leaving him behind. Then she turned and ran, cloak flaring, crown flashing into full, combat bright brilliance as it reassembled above her head. The door hissed shut behind her. Jax stood in the humming silence, fists clenched, as the Empire began to crack. Staying put lasted exactly as long as it took for the first tremor to shudder through the palace. The cell walls thrummed like a plucked wire. Dust shook loose from some invisible seam. Beyond the transparent barrier, he saw a column of smoke claw up from the lower levels. Yeah, Jax muttered. Nope. He scanned the room. No obvious vents he could crawl through. No conveniently loose panels. Zephyrians built their prisons like they built their warships, redundantly and with a pathological hatred of escape attempts. But no system was perfect. Especially one retrofitted into a room that used to be a luxury guest suite. He sank to his knees by the door, pressing his ear against the seam. The faint electric hum of the locking mechanism vibrated through his skull. He found the control panel by touch, a smooth square of slightly warmer material to the left of the frame. Sorry about this, he said to no one, and drove his elbow into it. Pain flared up his arm. The panel didn't so much as scratch. Okay, he hissed, cradling his elbow. Different approach. There was still furniture. A low table of some crystal composite. Lightweight but rigid. He heaved it up and slammed it into the panel. Once. Twice. On the third hit, something inside sparked. The lights flickered. The crown of the palace AI probably made a disapproving noise somewhere. Come on, Jax grunted, lifting the table again. You survived artillery barrages, Monroe. Don't get showed up by interior design. The fourth impact cracked the panel. A filament of light snapped, spitting sparks. The lock whined. The door shuddered. Then, with a reluctant sigh, it slid halfway open and jammed. Jax dropped the table, took 3 steps back, and kicked. The door shrieked but yielded another 20 centimeters, just enough for him to squeeze through if he didn't mind losing some skin. Congratulations, he told himself, wriggling sideways into the hallway. You've graduated from accidental political icon to actual criminal. The corridor was chaos made physical. The usual soft lighting had been replaced with pulsing red washes. Servants raced past, dragging carts of medical supplies. Guards sprinted in tight formations, weapons drawn. Hey! One shouted as Jax emerged, hair wild, shirt torn. You're supposed to be contained, Jax said. Yeah, that memo got lost in the explosion. He snatched the guard's secondary shock baton before the poor kid could react. A quick twist and a gentle shove had the Zephyrian pinned against the wall without serious injury. Which way to the Sovereign? Jax demanded. The throne hall, the guard stammered. They forced her there. Central access shaft, 3 levels up. Appreciate it, Jax said, and took off at a run. Palace interior design, he decided, was not optimized for sprinting. Too many dramatic overlooks, too many soaring staircases. He cut down service corridors and maintenance shafts, following the sound of distant weapons fire. Zephyrian energy blades made a very distinctive shriek when they clashed. By the time he reached the central access shaft, the air tasted like ozone and burned circuitry. The lift field flickered, unstable, but still functioning. He jumped. Weight vanished as the gravity reversed. He shot upward, dodging around a crate falling the other way, and landed hard on the throne hall level, knees protesting. "You're not 20 anymore," he muttered to himself. "Stop acting like your joints aren't made of recycled scrap." The doors to the Hall of Concord, doors that had taken a decade to forge from a single continuous piece of star metal, hung crooked on their hinges. A scorch mark ran across them where someone had fired a weapon on full charge. Voices roared inside. Jax tightened his grip on the stolen baton and stepped through. The Hall of Concord looked nothing like it had the day Jax first called the Sovereign adorable. Smoke curled from shattered light fixtures. One of the great banners had fallen, its hard light projector sputtering as it looped through a dozen different emblems. A chunk of ceiling had collapsed near the left-hand arch, scattering shards of luminescent crystal across the floor like fallen stars. At the center, at the foot of the comet-shaped dais, two lines faced each other. On one side, Lysara's personal guard, armor scorched, formation tight but thinning. Vyrek stood at their head, one gauntlet slick with his own glowing blood. On the other, a cluster of nobles and officers in crimson-trimmed robes, weapons leveled. Their insignia marked them as highborn, old houses with old grievances. At their center stood Sirek, crest spines flared to full height. "Step down, Lysara!" he shouted, voice cracking under the amplification field. "You have turned the Dominion into a spectacle. You dine with street vendors. You laugh with a Terran. You kneel for no one, yet you bend for him." The last word dripped like acid. Lysara stood at the base of the dais, crown blazing, mantle torn at one shoulder where a bolt had grazed her. Her bioluminescent veins pulsed fast and bright. "I lead," she said, voice carrying over the crackle of damaged systems. "You mistake rigidity for strength, Sirek. Power that cannot bend will shatter. You speak of bending," he spat, "because you have already broken. Look at you, wounded, bleeding, clutching your pet humans, phrases like charms." He raised his rifle. "I will restore the Dominion to what it was. Untouchable. Unquestioned." Jax saw his fingers tighten on the trigger. He didn't think. He moved. The world narrowed to the path between them, shattered marble, spilled blood, drifting ash. He sprinted across it, baton humming, lungs burning. "Heads up!" he yelled. Sirek spun, surprised, as Jax slammed into him from the side. The shot went wide, carving a molten groove in the dais. They hit the floor in a tangle of limbs and fabric. Zephyrians were stronger than humans. Denser bones, more efficient musculature. Sirek recovered fast, driving an elbow into Jax's ribs. Pain flared white. Jax rolled with it, literally this time, and jabbed the baton into Sirek's side. The stunned charge snapped through the noble's body. His crest spines lit like a blown fuse. He jerked once and went limp. Around them, the hall paused. Because now there was a human on the floor, panting, battered, very much in the way. Jax staggered to his feet, putting himself between Lysara and the rest of the rebels. "Hi," he said, raising the baton. "Jax Monroe. Professional bad idea. Please direct all complaints to my non-existent supervisor." Lysara's eyes were wide. "You disobeyed a direct order," she said faintly. "Yeah," he said. "You'll have to imprison me later." One of the rebels snarled. "You see? He infects her with insolence. He stands where no alien should stand." "Buddy," Jax said, "if you don't want aliens standing in front of your guns, maybe stop aiming at the one person keeping this place from eating itself." Blaster barrels swung toward him. Vyrek raised his sword, voice booming. "Stand down!" No one did. Both lines tensed. Lysara stepped forward. "Enough," she said. The word dropped into the room like a stone into water, ripples radiating outward. "We will not settle this in smoke and martyrdom," she said. "You claim I have corrupted the Empire. Show me your uncorrupted version." She shrugged off her mantle. It fell to the floor with a heavy whisper, pooling at her feet. She stepped in front of Jax. "You want an untouchable sovereign?" she said. "One who never laughs, never errs, never listens. That is not strength. That is a statue. And statues cannot adapt when the world shifts beneath them." One of the younger rebels faltered. "You have made us a joke," he said. "Other empires laugh. And yet our alliances have never been stronger," she said. "Our trade routes freer. Our people more willing to speak. You know why? Because they see me try. They see me stumble. They see me roll with it, as the Terran says, and get back up." She turned slightly, enough to catch Jax in the corner of her vision. "Power is not being feared from a distance. Power is standing close enough for them to see you bleed and still follow." Blood dripped from her torn shoulder, glowing faintly where it hit the floor. Jax felt something in his chest twist. "She's right," he said, "because not saying it would physically hurt. Fear gets obedience. Sure. It also gets betrayal, coups, and very awkward family dinners. You want loyalty? Try not being a walking nightmare 24/7. "Silence, human," snarled the rebel. "No," Lysara said sharply. "Let him speak. You wanted to erase his influence. Hear it first." Jax swallowed. The baton was heavy in his hand. "Look," he said. "I'm not from here. I don't know your songs or your sacred days. I grew up under a cracked dome on a rock that barely qualified as habitable. I learned early that if the people in charge don't listen, people die." He gestured at Lysara with the baton. "She listens. To her people. To idiots like me. That doesn't make her weak. It makes her terrifying in a way you haven't even figured out yet." "How is this terrifying?" one of them scoffed. "Because you can't predict her," Jax said. "You knew the old version. Angry statue queen, crushes dissent, never smiles. Easy to plan around. You could push her into the same bad decisions over and over. This version?" He grinned, breathless. "She learns. She adapts. She cracks jokes in policy meetings. She's alive. That's a lot harder to overthrow." Silence. Then, from somewhere in the back, not from rebels, not from guards, but from one of the junior clerks who'd been cowering behind a column, a short, hysterical laugh escaped. All eyes swung toward the sound. The clerks slapped a hand over their mouth. Then, slowly, they lowered it. "If the sovereign is a joke," they said, voice shaking, "she is the first one who has made us laugh with her, not out of fear." It broke something. Another clerk nodded. A guard relaxed their stance. A rebel's rifle dipped a few centimeters. Lysara took the opening. "Lay down your weapons," she said, no less commanding for the softness in her tone. "I will not order your execution. I will not make martyrs of you. But I will not return to the version of me that let this empire stagnate." One of the older rebels hissed. "You cannot undo centuries of order because a human made you giggle, Lysara." She smiled then. Small. Sharp. "I am not," she said. "I am rewriting them because he reminded me I was not a machine." Her crown shifted. For the first time, Jax saw it clearly, not a static ornament, but a live interface, linked into the palace systems, into the Dominion's larger neural net. Its light flickered, pattern changing. She was changing how it thought. "I am done being the algorithm of your fear," she said quietly. "I will be its override." One by one, weapons hit the floor. Not all. Not easily. But enough. The coup didn't end in a blaze of glory. It ended in exhausted surrender, in weapons powered down, in rebels being led away not in chains, but under armed escort bound for trials that would be messy and public and real. Later, sitting on the cracked edge of the dais, Jax let his head fall back against the cool star metal. You throw one hell of a staff meeting, he said. Lysara, seated beside him, laughed through a wince as Vyrek tightened the bandage on her shoulder. I should have kept you in your cell, she said. You tried, he reminded her. I'm very bad at staying where I'm told. She smiled at him then, a real, lopsided thing, crooked by pain and relief. I know, she said. That is why I am very glad you didn't. The galaxy didn't have time to process the near coup before Lysara dragged it into another shock. Absolutely not. Sirek rasped from his medbed, where he was being repaired from Jax's baton. You cannot appear with him. Not after this. Lysara didn't bother looking at him. You are under sedation, she said. Be quiet. I am not, he began, then his sedative drip ticked up by a fraction of a dose and he slumped. Jax flicked the control node on the drip line innocently. Whoops! They stood in the primary broadcast chamber, a high-ceilinged hall dominated by a raised platform and a crystalline arch bristling with transmitters. Technicians scurried like nervous beetles, checking fearfully that every channel was locked, every relay synced. All sectors are online, reported the chief engineer. Their hands shook slightly. Lysara stepped onto the dais. The crown brightened, interfacing with the broadcast system. Her mantle hung open at the shoulder, the bandage underneath stark against her dark skin. Jax, she said, without taking her eyes off the galaxy map hovering before her. Stand beside me. Last time I stood next to you on a live feed, he said, mounting the dais. Half the quadrant had an aneurysm. Then they are practiced, she said. They will survive another. He took his place at her side. The arch flared. Transmission is live, murmured the engineer. Across hundreds of worlds, feeds cut from regular programming to the image of the sovereign of the Zephyrian Dominion standing beside a battered human, both of them marked by the same recent battle. People of the Dominion, Lysara said. Citizens. Allies. Curious eavesdroppers. A faint smile. You have seen much rumor today. She gestured, and the system overlaid security footage, edited, but not falsified, of the coup. Armed nobles, guards, the crack of weapons the moment she bled. Gasps echoed even through the muted speakers in the chamber. There are those who say I have weakened us, she continued. That by laughing, by listening, by allowing you to see me err, I have made the Dominion a target. She tilted her head slightly toward Jax without looking at him. They blame this human. Jax raised a hand. Hi, Mom, he said automatically. Lysara's lips twitched. 1,000 meme engines spun up at once. They are not entirely wrong, she said. Jax blinked. Before Jax Monroe arrived, I was untouchable. A statue on a pedestal. Those who advised me polished the stone, hid the cracks, ensured nothing living could grow around it. She spread her hands, bandaged and bloody. He shattered that illusion. He told me truths no one else dared. He made me laugh. He made me angry. He made me remember I had a pulse. She turned fully toward the nearest camera. I will not apologize for this. On worlds where people had expected her to crawl back into her old armor, jaws dropped. We have mistaken terror for stability, Lysara said. We have mistaken silence for respect. That ends now. She reached out. Jax felt her fingers find his. It was not a romantic gesture, not quite. It was an anchor. I choose, she said, each word measured and heavy, to rule as a person, not as an algorithm. I choose to listen. I choose to laugh. I choose to keep the human who reminded me I could do both. It hit Jax then what she was doing. Not just defending him. Binding herself to him in front of everyone. He said, leaning toward her. Lys, you understand how Terrans are going to interpret this, right? Yes, she murmured. You are fond of interpreting everything as a potential romance. It is one of your more endearing illnesses. He swallowed a laugh. Those who cannot accept this evolution, she said, voice rising again, are free to leave my council. They are not free to drag this empire backward through blood. She paused. Jax felt her squeeze his hand, just once. This is not the Dominion collapsing, she said. This is the Dominion learning to breathe. The feed lingered on them, sovereign and human, side by side, injured but standing, then cut to reaction shots. Crowds in plazas, families in cramped skyhabs, soldiers in barracks. There was fear. There was outrage. There was also something else. Hope looked very similar to terror, at first glance. The engineer cut the feed. Silence dropped into the chamber. Jax let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. So, he said. That happened? Lysara turned to him fully now, crown dimming as it detached from the network. If I had asked you, she said, before that broadcast what to do, what would you have said? Deny everything, he said. Blame a hacker. Claim deep fakes. Pretend you barely know me. She smiled, slow and wicked. And would you have believed me? No, he said. But it would have been safer. Her fingers tightened on his. I am tired of safe, she said. Safe is stagnant. Safe gave us nobles with rifles in our hall. He searched her face, the tired lines around her eyes, the way her shoulders sagged now that the performance was over. You realize they're going to call me your consort, he said. Yes, she said. They already do. And they're going to write songs about this. Undoubtedly, she said, with a tiny eye roll he was unreasonably proud of eliciting. And they're going to dissect every glance, every hand touch, every time we breathe in vaguely similar rhythms. Then, she said, stepping closer, we may as well give them something accurate to obsess over. He blinked. What do you? She kissed him. Not in the coy, camera-stealing way of political theater. In the exhausted, relieved, terrified way of someone who had finally thrown their crown at the universe and said catch. It wasn't long. It didn't need to be. When she pulled back, her golden eyes were unshielded. This, she said softly, voice not carrying to anyone but him now, is not protocol. Yeah, he whispered, a little dazed. That's kind of why I like it. The galaxy forgot wars faster than it forgot gossip. A decade after the failed coup and the broadcast that followed, most of the Dominion no longer argued about whether Lysara's reforms were treason or evolution. They argued about what to wear for Gorgeous Day. The name wasn't official. No calendar etched it in government stone. But on the anniversary of the day a human called the Sovereign of Zephyr. Adorable. Couples exchanged luminescent flowers. Street vendors sold. Roll with it. Snacks in commemorative wrappers. Kids dared each other to compliment statues in public squares and bow dramatically afterward. Jax found it all deeply embarrassing. Your face, Lysara said, not even pretending to hide her smile as she watched a drone projection of a parade from some outer habitat. A massive float depicting a stylized human and Zephyrian holding hands drifted by, firing confetti. It's not my face, he protested. That guy has way more hair. The beard is accurate, she said. I trimmed that once, he muttered. Never again. The children rioted. The children in question chose that moment to barrel into the viewing chamber. Dad! Yelled Rian, the older of the twins, half human, half Zephyrian, all chaos. His bioluminescent veins flashed gold as he skidded to a stop. Mom said we can go outside today. To the real plaza. She did? Jax looked at Lysara. I did, she confirmed. Supervised. Their daughter Lyra stuck her head around her brother's shoulder. Her crown, an early neural interface model, flickered between icons as it tried to keep up with her emotional spikes. Can we see the street singers? Lyra demanded. And the statue? Jax winced. Why the statue? Because it's funny, Rian said. Everyone kisses it and says adorable and then runs away before the guards can catch them. Lysara arched an eyebrow at Jax. You have become a ritual, she said. I hate this timeline, he muttered. You do not, she said, standing. You love it. He did. He loved that the palace was loud now. That laughter bounced off the walls. That ministers occasionally interrupted meetings to tell jokes their kids had taught them. He loved that the Dominion was messy, argumentative, and startlingly open compared to the frozen empire he'd first stepped into. He loved that on some worlds people still feared Lysara. But more and more they trusted her. They walked together through the palace, flanked by a discreet guard detail whose weapons were holstered and whose expressions were more exasperated than terrified. In the central plaza, the statue of Lysara and Jax, erected without either of their consent, stood in ridiculous, dramatic glory. The sculptor had given him a heroic jawline and her a cape longer than physics. A crowd had gathered. Some bowed in the old style. Most didn't bother. Children climbed the base of the statue. Street performers played a jaunty remix of the old broadcast. As the real Lysara and Jax stepped into view, the song shifted to a cheer. "Radiance!" someone yelled. "Jax!" someone else shouted, just as loud. Jax felt Lyra squeeze his hand so tight his fingers tingled. Her smaller crown flickered excitedly, matching his pulse. Lysara's own crown pulsed soft rose gold. She likes this, he realized. Not the adoration. Not the worship. The noise. The proof that her empire was alive enough to make fun of her. "You realize," he said under his breath, "that somewhere, some historian is writing a very serious paper about the gorgeous principle." "They already have," she said. "They invited me to lecture. I declined." "Why?" She smiled faintly. "Some things should remain legend at the edges." A young Zephyrian with a makeshift guitar analog stepped forward, voice trembling. "Radiance," they said. Would you say it? Just once?" Lysara tilted her head. "Say what?" "The word," the musician whispered. "The human word. The one from the stories." Jax groaned. "You don't have to." She looked at him. At the way he fidgeted. At the way his ears had gone suspiciously red. Then she turned to the crowd. "Very well," she said. She stepped up onto the low plinth beside the statue, reached down, and tugged Jax up with her. He stumbled. The crowd laughed. He mock-bowed. "This human," Lysara said, and even without amplification the plaza went quiet. "Is—" She paused long enough for him to squirm. "Adorable," she finished, deadpan. The plaza erupted. Jax buried his face in his hands. "I am never living this down." "Correct," she said, and kissed his temple. Someone in the crowd captured the moment on a drone cam. By morning, it would be on every channel. He'd complain. He always did. He'd also watch it 3 times and smile into his coffee. Epilogue: The Inconvenient Truth. Years wore differently on Zephyrians and humans. Jax got the softer end of that deal. His hair went silver at the temples. His joints complained louder in the mornings. His scars ached when the atmospheric pressure shifted. Lysara's changes were subtler: lines at the corners of her eyes, faint dimming of the bioluminescent flux that once blazed non-stop. Her crown's constant hum gentled as she ceded more active control to a younger generation of ministers and, eventually, to their children. They did not step down. Not completely. They shifted sideways. Advisors. Anchors. Living myths allowed to sit down. On a quiet evening in the palace garden, Jax lounged on a bench that had finally been adjusted to Terran ergonomics after a decade of his complaints. He cradled his battered tin mug, the one relic of his pre-Dominion life that had survived multiple near-destructions. Lysara joined him, robe whispering over the bioluminescent moss. "You know," he said, taking a sip of terrible coffee he refused to give up, "for someone who used to own 9 dreadnoughts, you walk very quietly these days." "I am practicing stealth," she said, sitting beside him. "It is the only way to escape ministers eager to show me new budget projections." "You did this to yourself," he said. "You taught them to care." "Cruel irony," she agreed. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the distant glimmer of the city through the garden's transparent canopy. "Do you regret it?" she asked softly. "Which part?" he said. "The time I called a living weapon adorable? The near assassinations? The coup? The 10 years of awkward public holidays? Any of it," she said. "If you had stayed silent that day, I'd be bored," he said. "And you'd be miserable." She laughed very quietly. "You know what still gets me?" he said. "I didn't plan any of this. I just opened my mouth and let the stupid fall out." "It was not stupid," she said. "It was inconvenient truth." "Catchy," he said. "You should put that on coins." "We put your face on coins," she said. "It was an experiment. It ended poorly." He choked. "You what?" "Never mind," she said quickly. "They were melted." He stared at her. She smiled, unrepentant. "Liz." "Jax." He snorted, then sobered. "Do you remember what you said back then?" he asked. "About statues and pedestals?" She nodded. "I remember everything I said while terrified," she said. "It is a regrettable habit." "You weren't the only one," he said. "I was scared out of my mind, you know. First day here. Whole hall full of aliens who could squish me, and I just blurted. You were always honest when you were afraid," she said. "That is how I knew I could trust you." "Most people lie when they're scared," he said. "Humans are strange," she agreed. "You weaponize truth at the worst possible moments." He thought of other worlds, other leaders, other times when saying what needed to be said had cost him promotions, friends, whole futures. "Yeah," he said. "We do." She reached over and took his hand. Her fingers were cooler than his, faintly humming with the residual energy of a lifetime plugged into an empire. "Once," she said, "I believed humanity's greatest weapon was your capacity for violence. Your history read as blood, improvisation, and stubbornness." "Still not wrong," he said. "But I was incomplete," she said. "Your true weapon is this." She squeezed his hand. "You say the thing no one else will. You look at the monster on the throne and call her adorable. You tell an empire it can laugh at itself and survive." He shifted, uncomfortable under the praise. "Plenty of humans don't do that," he said. "A lot of us just go along." "Yes," she said. "But enough of you do. Enough to tilt worlds." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "They study it now, you know," she murmured. "Academies teach the Monroe-Lasara paradigm as a case study. How one ill-advised compliment destabilized an entire power structure and rebuilt it stronger." He groaned. "They used my last name? That makes it real." "Very," she said. "You know what they'll never understand," he said. "All those scholars, writing serious papers?" "What?" He looked up at the simulated stars, at the subtle shift in the crown light reflecting on the garden walls as it mirrored their shared calm. "That none of it was strategy," he said. "It was just being unable to shut up when something needed to be said. That," she said, "is exactly what makes it powerful." He smirked. "Humanity, we trip over truth and accidentally start revolutions. Better than never tripping at all," she said. They fell quiet again. The city murmured beyond the glass. Somewhere, faintly, a street musician played an old song about a human who walked into a throne room and rewired a galaxy. "Say it," Lasara whispered. He glanced down. "Say what?" "The word," she said, eyes glinting. "The one that started this." He rolled his eyes. "You're never going to let that go, are you?" "Never," she agreed. "Fine," he said. He turned, took in the woman beside him, older now, yes, but still crowned in shifting light, still dangerous, still stubborn enough to dismantle her own myths. "You're adorable, Liz," he said. The word had changed with time. It carried the weight of battles fought, children raised, policies argued over at 3 a.m. It wasn't flippant anymore. It was reverent. Her crown pulsed a soft, intimate rose. And you, she said, are infuriating. And honest. And mine. He squeezed her hand. Deal. Above them, satellites adjusted their orbits. Trade routes rerouted around new storms. Somewhere, a junior officer made a sarcastic comment in a briefing and didn't get executed for it. History ticked on. In the unofficial footnotes, in the gossip, in the street songs, the story remained simple. A human walked into a hall of unshakable power, looked at the most feared being in the sector, and told her the truth in the stupidest possible way. And in that moment, the universe learned to laugh. And never quite stopped. The end. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you'd like to hear more, like and subscribe so you never miss a new video.